we've been led to believe that God ain't that mean. No, he ain't mean. He's righteous. He's holy. He cannot abide sin. Disobedience is sin. He won't put up with it. We need to understand that. I don't care for how long you've been told that it's going to be all right. And somebody will just pat you on your head and tell you you're okay. Read the Word. Read the Word for what the Word says. Read the Word and understand what the Word says. We need to get it. We need to really understand it. We really need to let it sink in. Anybody, according to just these few scriptures I read, and we could go all over the New Testament and find similar scriptures, but anybody, according to these, who makes anything of this life a priority over Christ are not usable. They're not fit. We are very, I was going to say fortunate, but that's not even the word. That doesn't even encapsulate it. But we are very fortunate that Christ is merciful, that he's long-suffering. Because there are records in the Bible of people who were disobedient, and that was it. Mm-hmm. They were done. We can be thankful that he is merciful, that he is long-suffering, that he gives us chance after chance after chance after chance. And again, something I say often, there may very well come a time when he says this is the last chance. And I know I throw these things in there all the time, but I got to give them to you as God gives them to me. When the sports, when the family, when the job, when anything else takes priority, you're in the category of these people we just read about. You're there. You can think what you want to think. You can make any excuses you want to make. You got to argue with God, not with me.
Right.
I want to go, staying in the book of Luke, we're going to go over to chapter 14. While you're turning that, I want to say this. I know there's good, committed Christians here. I know that. And there are people here who love the Lord. And I also know, because God has spoken to my heart, we're all guilty of some of these things. When God calls you out on something, you better do something about it. He doesn't do it just to hear me talk. He doesn't do it just to fill up 30 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever it is on Sunday morning. When God reveals something to you, he expects you to do something about it. Luke chapter 14, breaking in at verse 26. If any man come to me and hate not his father and mother and wife and children and brethren and sisters, yea, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. And whosoever doth not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. I've explained this before, but I'm going to explain it again. Where he says hate, he don't mean hate the way we think hate. Go back to the original, it means to love less. Or to love more, depending on which way it's used. But what he's saying here is if you love them more than you love me, you can't be my disciple. If you put them before me, you can't be my disciple. You have to put me above all things. Listen to what he said. If any man come to me and hate not his father, or love less his father, his mother, his wife, his children, his brethren, his sisters, and his own life, he cannot be my disciple. There sits my mom, there sits my sister, there sits my wife, and I love them. But Christ must be first. Regardless. There's times when you all know she has a lot of physical ailments and problems. There's times when she was in pain or really sick or down or bad. And I would have rather stayed with her. But I had to come here and do the job that God has called me to do. There are times when there's been my children have things. And you know what my children do? Everything they do it on Sunday. There have been times when I don't get to see all of them very much together and spend time with them. But there's lots of opportunities if I'd skip church and go spend time with them on Sunday. And I'd love to spend time with them because I love them. But Christ must be first.
That's right.
Always. Can't you keep Christ first and still miss church? Now, he told me, forsake not the assembling of yourselves together as the manner of some.
That's right.
He called me to be here.
That's right.
If I don't do what he called me to do, then I have not put him first. If I can't put him above these and my children and my own wants, he said in your own life also, the things I would like to do, the things I want to do, the things I desire to do, the things that please me have to come lower on the list.
Right.
Christ must come first.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be honest, and maybe you don't have no problem being honest about this stuff. There are things God has me to do I really do not want to do. Well, that's something for a preacher to say. In my flesh, I don't. I got to be honest. But because of the love of Christ, and because he has commanded me to do so, and because I love him, I want to serve him, I do it anyway. He's got to be first. And I know that it sounds so simple. But we don't do it. We don't. We do not put him first. We do not put him above everything else. And I will guarantee you, there are people sitting here who have put family before Christ. There are people sitting here who have put entertainment before Christ. There are people sitting here who have put other things before Christ. And he said, if you do that, you can't be my disciple. You can't be. That's pretty plain and simple. He didn't say, if you do that, it's going to be hard for you to be my disciple. He didn't say, if you do that, it's going to be more difficult for you to be my disciple. He said, if you do that, you can't. You cannot be my disciple. And while we're there, let me throw this in. Do you know how many times the word Christian or Christians is in the Bible? 3 times. Only 3. Do you know how many times the word disciple or disciples is in the Bible? 273. We are to be disciples. You know what a disciple is? You read when Christ is talking, does he ever say you can't be a Christian? He never says that. He says you can't be my disciple. What a disciple is, well, first, a Christian is a follower of Christ. I can't quote this exactly. God just put it on my mind. There's a scripture that said they followed afar off. You can be a follower of Christ from afar off. There were secret followers of Christ in the Sanhedrin. A Christian is a follower of Christ. And that's not a word that Christ ever used. That was a word men came up with. Okay? But Christ always used the word disciple. He wants us to be his disciples. What is a disciple? A disciple is a pupil who learns and understands. We need to understand. We need to learn what the Bible really says. We need to learn what Christ really expects. And we need to understand it. We need to understand, and I know you're probably sick of me with this stuff. I don't think we know this. I don't think we understand it. I think a lot of our understanding is what we were taught by some man because that's what he was taught by some man because that's what he was taught by some man. We need to get in this word and understand this word. We need to read this word for what this word said. We need to understand this word, and the only way to understand this word is when the teacher comes. And that teacher is the Holy Ghost who will come and teach you all things. But you know what? A lot of time he can't teach us because we're sitting in class going, nah, 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 so we can't hear anything else. We need to understand what this really says, and what this really says, and basically I'm going to put in my words. Jesus said, if you don't do the stuff that I'm telling you to do, you can't be my disciple. If you don't do the stuff I'm telling you to do, you ain't fit to be my disciple. If you don't do the stuff that I'm telling you to do, there is a consequence. and again. God knew who would be sitting here. God knew the message. God knew that we needed it, because every one of us sitting here has fallen short in some area. Every one of us sitting here has done this stuff before. There are people here who have put their wife before church. There are people here who put their kids before Christ. There are people here who have put a sporting event before Him. There are people here who put making money before Him. There are people here who put fishing before Him, or whatever else it is. We have all done it. And God is not pleased with that. Well, God knows I am but flesh. Yes, He knows you are but flesh. That's why He told you to overcome the flesh. That's why He sent the Holy Ghost to indwell you and give you the strength to overcome the flesh. But we have to do what God has called us to do. I'm going to move on, but I want that to stick. I want you to understand, if you put anything else, I don't care what it is, if you put anything else ahead of Christ, He said, I didn't say it, I didn't make up, you cannot be His disciple. And then He goes on and He says, and whosoever doth not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. I want you to understand what it means to bear the cross. Somebody who picked up a cross knew they weren't coming back. Somebody who picked up the cross knew they were on a one-way journey. Somebody who picked up the cross knew they were going to face some pain. Somebody who picked up the cross knew they were going to be ridiculed, that they were going to be made a spectacle. Somebody who picked up the cross had this understanding that it was a total commitment. And He said, if you don't bear your cross, a total commitment, a one-way journey. Listen, when they walked Christ, and probably those thieves too, but we have the account of Christ, and you probably can go in history and read about Romans crucifying people, but when they took Him from where He was to that place, it was a one-way trip. There were no side roads, there was no turning around and going back, there was no getting halfway and saying, whoa, 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 I changed my mind. We need that kind of commitment. That's the kind of commitment that we are called to. If we ain't got that kind of commitment, if we haven't given ourselves to that degree, if we're not willing to put up with what comes with it, the pain and the ridicule and the mocking and all that, and then we're not fit. And again, I want you to understand, if we're doing this the right way, especially in the day and age in which we live and going forward, if we're doing this the way that Christ has called us to do it, there's going to be ridicule. There's going to be mocking. And there's going to be some pain associated with it. There's going to be some problems. There's going to be some trouble. There's going to be some trial. I'm going to tell you something, from everything I'm reading and from everything I'm hearing, we're only about that far away to where you're not allowed to preach against queers and you're not allowed to preach against some other things in the church. It's close. It's close. Well, Donald Trump will save us. It's coming.
That's right.
I don't care who's in office, it's coming. Maybe he'll get reelected and it'll be 4 years before it comes. I don't know. Maybe he'll get reelected and he'll get overridden and it'll come anyway. I don't know, but I know it's coming. How do you know? The Bible tells me so. Read it. Just read it. What has been will be. There's no new thing under the sun. I don't know if you've ever gotten into this sort of thing, but if you study history, it's cyclical. It just keeps going, repeating itself. And we've talked a lot about this, and you probably already know this, and then I'll try to move on. Line us up with Israel. And watch the path they took. We're taking the same path. We're going to end up in the same place they ended up in. That's a whole other thing. But unless you put Christ before everything else, unless you make that commitment as one who has taken up their cross, then you're not fit to be His disciple. And he goes on and said, for which of you intending to build a tower, sitteth not down first and counteth the cost, whether he is sufficient to finish it? Lest haply after he hath laid the foundation and is not able to finish it, all that behold him begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish. Or what king going to war? I'm going to skip that part. It's just a reiteration of that. But what he's saying here, what we need to do is sit down and understand the cost that we're going to have to pay and be willing to accept the cost that we're going to have to pay. Because if we get halfway through it and we can't go on, or we quit, or we give up, then what happens? People begin to mock and people begin to ridicule. Not you, Christ.
You know they judge Christ by you. They measure Christ by you. The Christ they see is the Christ you present. It's not you that suffers that much for this. It's Christ. It's a reputation of Christ that suffers for this kind of stuff. And there are so many that if it's too hard or it's too embarrassing or whatever the case may be, that they're just ready to not do it anymore. I won't do it. Yeah, I'll go to church, I'll pay my tithes, I'll do this, I'll do that, all the easy stuff I'll do, but I ain't going to do this. And what happens when you quit? It makes our God look bad. It gives them a picture of a God that is not the God of this word. We need to count the cost. Listen, I've said this before. You need to be honest with yourself. If you're going to serve God, then you better serve God. If you ain't going to get in all the way, then you better admit it. It's a fearful thing to fall into the hands of a living God. I would rather that you were hot or cold, because if you're lukewarm, if you're only going to go halfway, I will spew you out. You know the scriptures. Listen, it is so much better to admit to God, I don't have it. I don't got the courage, I don't got the backbone, I don't got the guts. At least if you do that, then God can begin to help you. As long as you are deceiving yourself and trying to deceive everybody else and saying you are something that you ain't, saying you'll do something that you won't, you're never going to get any help.
Right.
When you can admit, when you can look at yourself and say, I don't got it, I don't have the power, I don't have the courage, I don't have this, I don't have that. Once you get to that point, then God can help you. But you got to admit it to yourself first. You got to count the cost. Look and see if you got what it takes to finish the job. They talk about a person building a tower. If he gets halfway and stops, everybody's going to mock and laugh and all that kind of stuff. Listen, you need to stop and look at yourself. If this happens, can I stand up against it? If they want to lock me up, can I take that? If they want to call me this and call me that, can I deal with that? You got to make sure that you know that you can. And if you can't, then you can go to God and you can say, I don't think I can. I don't know if I have it in me. I need you to strengthen me. I need you to help me. And then you can become a person who can do that. But as long as you just keep telling yourself you can do something that you can't, you're never going to get anywhere. You're never going to be fit. You're never going to be one that he wants to use. He goes on and he says about them building the tower, and then he says about the king before he goes to war. He makes sure that he's able to come against him with the troops that he has. And verse 33 says, so likewise, whosoever he be of you that forsaketh not all that he hath, he cannot be my disciple. And again, if we are willing to put him above everything else, you've got to be willing to forsake everything else for Christ. If you don't, you cannot be his disciple. You can sit and call yourself a Christian. That don't make you a disciple. And I want to make this clear again, because God really burned it on me. A Christian is a follower of Christ. And I can show you in the Bible where there were followers who followed afar off. That's what a lot of us are doing. He wants disciples. He wants people who will learn of him and understand what it is that he expects out of them. Not just people who follow from afar off. He says, so likewise, whoever be of you that forsaketh not all that he hath, he cannot be my disciple. Now we're going to a really well-known scripture that's said here a lot of time. Why is it here, at this place in the Bible? If you don't forsake all that you have, you cannot be my disciple. Salt is good. But if the salt has lost its savor, if you're not a disciple, you're not the salt. If you don't forsake all, you're not the salt. If you don't put him above everything, you're not the salt. How do I become the salt? Forsaking everything else. Putting Christ before everything else. If you don't do that, you are not the salt. If you're sitting here this morning and you put other things ahead of Christ, whether it be family, whether it be money, whether it be entertainment, whatever it is, if you're not willing to count the cost, if you're not willing to take up your cross, if you're not willing to do these things that we've been talking about and put him above everything else and deal with whatever the consequences may be,